Chapter 1. Return to Avenfore. July 1959. 1. A shriek from the train waiting on platform 3 set the butterflies in William Howbler's stomach fluttering again. "Are you all right, Will?" His mother's voice broke his reverie. Prudence Howbler stood a short distance away with his younger sister Kristen, waiting to say their goodbyes. William thought how cool and elegant his mother looked on this hot July day. "I'm fine, thanks, Mum," he said, smiling at her. Although inside he knew he really wasn't. At the very least, it was a day of mixed emotions. He would be parted from his family for the first time in his life. But today was also the day he would finally return to Avenfore, the place he'd been longing to go back to for the past 10 years, the place that he and his family had mysteriously left when he was 4 years old. Another roar erupted from the engine beside them, and Kristen's tiny bottom lip began to tremble. William bent down to give her a goodbye hug. "Don't be sad, Chrissy. And don't worry about me. I'll be fine. You and Mum and Dad'll have a wonderful time in Marburg, and I'll be safe in Avenfore." "But why can't you come to Germany with us, William?" Kristen's blue eyes were tearful. "I don't want you to be all alone without us." William smiled. "I won't be alone, Chrissy. I'll have Aunt Edna, Uncle Walter and Cousin Elsie to look after me." "But I don't want you to live in Avenfore," Kristen wailed. "Why can't you come with us?" "Hush now, sweetheart, don't upset yourself." Prudence Howbler bent to comfort her daughter. "William will be starting at his new school in St. Elm's in September, and Daddy and I thought all the traveling to Germany and then back again for the school term would be too unsettling for him. Which is why we asked Aunt Edna and Uncle Walter if William could spend the summer in Avenfore with them." His mother was smiling, but William could see the sadness in her large hazel eyes. So like his own, he knew. He was sure Prudence would have preferred to spend the summer with both her children together, but she and Kristen would be leaving for Germany in a few days' time. There was so much to organize before his father, Arnold Howbler, started in his new job as professor of Celtic studies at the University of Marburg, including a new house to furnish and a new school for Kristen. "Mom's right, Chrissy," William said. "I'll be safe as houses with Aunt Edna and Uncle Walter, and anyhow, we'll all be together again at Christmas." Kristen sniffed loudly, but she looked happier. "Promise?" she asked, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I promise. And what's more, I'll have a really great Christmas present for you." Kristen threw her arms around William's neck and kissed him. "Me too," she cried. "Min'll be from Germany, and it'll be the bestest Christmas present ever." "I'm sure it will, Chrissy Wissy," he said, giving the little girl another hug. His mother was staring at the large station clock suspended above the platform. "It's nearly time, Will," she murmured. "You should say goodbye to your father." William looked over to where Arnold Howbler was chatting with his uncle Walter Harkwell, a short, stout man with a mop of unruly white hair, who was carrying a rather large cuckoo clock haphazardly wrapped in brown paper under his arm. Walter looked around as the station master blew sharply on his whistle, urging passengers to board the train. "Goodness me," he said, hurrying over to William and Prudence. "We'd better hurry. Don't want the train to leave without us. I'd never hear the end of it from Edna. Now where's that porter chappie gone with all our luggage, Prue?" The cuckoo clock bounced up and down precariously in his arms as he spoke, and Kristen giggled as the mechanical cuckoo suddenly popped out of its miniature house with a loud cuckoo. William's mother put a hand on Uncle Walter's arm, knowing full well that her brother-in-law always got himself into a tiz if he thought there was even the slightest chance of them being late for anything. "Come along, Walt," she said with a smile. "The porter's over there. Kristen and I will help you make sure everything gets on the train on time." As Prudence led Walter and Kristen away towards their luggage, Arnold drew William to one side. In contrast to his uncle, William's father was tall and broad-shouldered with short wavy brown hair just like his son's. "I want you to do something for me when you get to Avenfore, William." "Yes, of course, Dad." "What is it?" Arnold didn't answer, and for a brief moment, William thought he saw an anxious look in his father's eyes. It surprised him. His father was a quiet man, but William had never thought of him as anything but brave and confident. He hoped Arnold wasn't worrying unnecessarily about his going to school. How could he? William was going to St. Elm's Boys' School, one of the most prestigious schools in the country, situated in Arnold's own hometown of Avenfore. Why, Arnold himself had gone there. He had been head boy in his time and had even taught at St. Elm's for a few years when William was a child. And yet William could see concern etched into his father's face. His father pulled a small sealed envelope out of his pocket and quietly slipped it to William. "I need you to give this letter to Abelard Greewolf, the Latin master at St. Elm's, William. Can you do that for me?" "Of course I will, Dad." "But isn't Mr. Greewolf one of your best friends in Avenfore? Couldn't you just post it to him?" Arnold Haubler shook his head vehemently. "No, no, William. It's very important that you deliver the letter in person." To William's amazement, Arnold looked about warily, as if he was checking to see if anyone was watching them. William had never seen his father behave like this. It was all very strange. Content that they were not being watched, Arnold continued. "You must give the letter to Abelard as soon as you can. And you must deliver it yourself. Don't give it to anyone else or tell anyone else about it. Promise me you will do this." William nodded solemnly. "Yes, Dad, I promise." A look of relief crossed Arnold Haubler's face, and he smiled at William. "Thank you, Will, I appreciate it. Now, hide the letter away safely in your jacket pocket, and make sure no one sees it." An impatient hiss emanated from the railway engine, and the station master blew a final boarding whistle. Uncle Walter, now safely ensconced on the train, yelled to William from the carriage window as the train began to gear up to leave the station. "Will, come on. You'll miss the train. Hurry up or you'll be left behind." William sprinted along the platform, stopping only to give his mother and Kristen a last goodbye hug, before leaping onto the train to join his uncle at their carriage window. "Thank you for coming to fetch him, Walter," Arnold shouted as the train began its slow chug along the station platform. "My pleasure, Arnold," Walter replied. "I always enjoy a trip to Dublin and I managed to get this." He patted the badly wrapped cuckoo clock which he was still clutching under his arm. "I know it will be like home from home with your uncle and aunt and your cousin Elsie, but don't forget to write to us often, sweetheart," Prudence called to William. "Telephone us if there's an emergency, Will," Arnold added, "but don't forget to tell the operator to reverse the charges." "I will, Mum, Dad, don't worry," William replied over the shriek of the engine's whistle as it built up momentum and began to pull its way slowly along the platform. Then he waved from the carriage window until the train had left the station, and his family were no more than tiny dots on the distant horizon. 2. William continued to stare out of the window as the train chugged its way from Dublin City. Uncle Walter sat opposite him. Lulled by the warmth of the early evening sunlight streaming through the carriage window and the chug-chug of the train, he soon dozed off, his arms wrapped around the clock and his head lolling gently over it as though he was whispering some pleasant secret to it. The grey of the city with its rows of houses and shops had been replaced by the lush green landscapes of the countryside, and the evening sun was fading before William looked up from his book and glanced at his wristwatch. 2 hours had passed. They should be at their destination soon. The sight of the watch brought a grin to William's face. It was brand new, a bang-up-to-date 1959 model. His father had bought it for him for his 14th birthday only a few days previously. Even Uncle Walter, who knew all about clocks, was impressed. William remembered the pride and affection in his father's face when he gave him the watch, but also a spark of concern, the same concern he had seen earlier in the railway station when Arnold had given him the letter for Mr. Greewolf. The letter. William patted his jacket to be sure. The letter was still there. He wondered again about it, but his attention was drawn by a peculiar sight outside the carriage window, as the train slowed for its approach to the railway station. A strange figure in a helmet and dark glasses, riding an old-fashioned motorcycle with a sidecar, was hurtling along the country road which ran parallel to the railway track. The figure was comical and frightening at the same time, and William was not certain if he should laugh or be somewhat anxious. But he had no time to think further about it, as the train entered the station and screeched to a halt beside the platform. William hastily shoved his book back into his satchel. Uncle Walter was still snoozing, so he tapped him gently on the shoulder. His uncle awoke with a start. "Are we there?" he burst out as he adjusted his tie and the collar of his jacket. "I'd almost dropped off, you know." Then, looking out of the window, he exclaimed, "By gum! We're in Dunfermline." Uncle Walter took out a comb and started to tidy his hair. William watched him, fighting back a laugh. "Elsie and Edna are meeting us at the station," Uncle Walter continued. "They're going to be really pleased to see you again. They've been making plans all week." Sure enough, Aunt Edna and Elsie were waiting for them when William and Uncle Walter stepped off the train. Aunt Edna hadn't changed a bit. A few years younger, shorter and plumper than her brother Arnold, she was as cheerful and welcoming as William remembered. His cousin Elsie, on the other hand, he hardly recognized. A few months older than William, she looked all grown up, with her luxurious light brown hair cut in a fashionable bob, large bright eyes and a mischievous grin. She was also as tall as him, and William was tall for his age. "My Will. But you've grown since we last saw you. You're more and more like your father," Aunt Edna murmured as she hugged him. "It's great to see you, Will," Elsie said, and she too gave him a hug. It was windy outside the station, and Aunt Edna kept a hand on her hat as she led them across the street to where she had parked their van. As they went, William noticed a figure coming out of the station door behind them. It was the motorcyclist he had seen from the train. The man was wearing a grey knee-length gabardine, his old-fashioned motorcycle helmet and dark glasses. He lingered at the front of the railway station, and, for some odd reason, William couldn't help feeling that he was watching them furtively from the other side of the street. Then he laughed to himself. How silly of him. His father's strange caution must be rubbing off on him. He was seeing shadows around every corner. Aunt Edna had stopped in front of a shiny dark green Morris Minor van with a smart cream-colored convertible canvas roof at the back, and was rummaging in her bag for the keys. "Ah, here they are," she exclaimed, as Elsie and William climbed into the back of the van, and Uncle Walter plonked himself in the front passenger seat, his arms protectively around the cuckoo clock on his lap. The sun was dropping below the horizon as they left Dunfermline. By the time they arrived in Avenfore, night had fallen, and the streets were deserted. William took the chance to peek out of the window in the canvas, for his first glimpse of Avenfore in so many years. As he did so, he noticed a motorcycle and sidecar with no lights, half hidden in the dark, stopped by the side of the road on the way into the village. Strange, William thought, it looks just like one first saw back in Dunfermline. Perhaps the motorcyclist lives here in Avenfore. But then he saw the signpost for Fern Lane up ahead, and the excitement of seeing his aunt's house and his old home once again banished all thoughts of strangers and motorcycles from his mind. 3. Fern Lane, where the Harkwells lived, was a quiet cul-de-sac. A wall at the end of the street separated it from the woods, and the area in between abounded with the ferns which gave the street its name. The lane had 4 houses on one side and 5 on the other. The Harkwells' house was the last on the right. But before it had been the Harkwells' house, it had been William's home. He and his parents had lived in this house for the first 4 years of his life. Of course, it had been his father's family home first. Arnold and Edna had grown up in that house. When Arnold moved his family to Dublin, Aunt Edna, Uncle Walter and Elsie had moved into the house from their flat over Uncle Walter's antique shop in the village square. Aunt Edna had opened the front door and switched on the lights. Elsie grabbed William's hand. "Come on up and see your bedroom," she said, dragging him up the stairs. When they got to the bedroom door, Elsie made him close his eyes. Then she opened the door and led him inside. "Okay, you can open them now," she said proudly. William opened his eyes. "It looks fantastic. And so cozy too. It's your old room, but we've done it up a bit for you, of course. New curtains. Mum sewed them herself. We've put on a new mattress which is so comfy," she added, letting herself fall onto the bed. But she was up again immediately to switch on the lamp on the bedside table. "The lamp is Art Deco. I chose it myself from Dad's shop. It was half hidden among all the antiques. It looks so much better here. It's perfect, Elsie. Really, I don't know what to say." He heard footsteps on the stairs outside, and then Aunt Edna burst into the room. "Ah, here you both are," she said. "I've been looking for you. Come on, Elsie, let William settle in. You've got all day tomorrow to talk. But if you're hungry, pet, there are some sandwiches for you in the kitchen." Elsie rolled her eyes behind her mother's back as she followed her out of the room. "If you want those sandwiches," she whispered with a grin, "you'd better get to the kitchen quickly. Otherwise Dad'll assume they're for him, and they'll be gone." William lay on the bed and stared up at the ceiling, allowing the memories of his childhood flood back into his mind. Most of them were of happy times playing with his cousin Elsie. However, some memories were more curious and puzzling. What he did remember was that when he had turned 4, something happened to make his father insist the family leave Avenfore and move to Dublin. His mother had always told him it was because his father wanted to study for a doctorate in history at Trinity College, Dublin. But there was always something niggling at the back of William's mind, a memory of something darker and more shadowy than all the other memories of Avenfore, and the same look of concern on Arnold's face as he had seen in the train station that afternoon. Whatever the reason for leaving the village, his parents had made a life for the family in Dublin, and William's little sister, Kristen, had been born there. William, however, had always missed Avenfore. Even if all he remembered about the place was that he'd been happy in it. What had always struck William as odd was that his father had himself returned frequently to Avenfore to attend meetings of the Night Bird Society, a local birdwatching club based in Drunfarnham and which held regular meetings at Ravenwood Castle. Unfortunately for William, Arnold had always insisted on attending the meetings alone. Each year William would plead with his father to be allowed to accompany him, but to his surprise and frustration, his father had always refused and would give no reason for his refusal. William had also not understood why he had not been allowed to attend his father's old school, St. Elm's. After all, it was one of the best schools in the country, and both his parents wanted the best education for him. But his pleadings in this respect had equally been rebuffed by his father for many years. There was a long waiting list for places, Arnold had said, and William's name was way down the list. William was sure with his father's connections to the school that he could have tried to have his son's name moved nearer to the top of the list, but to his disappointment, Arnold had told him there was nothing to be done and he would simply have to wait his turn. Therefore, William's joy and excitement had been boundless only a few weeks beforehand, when his father had told him that he had been offered, and had accepted a place at St. Elm's for William for the coming autumn term. He had been bewildered and delighted in equal measure when Arnold also told him that he and Prudence had thought it a good idea that he stay with his aunt and uncle in Avenfore for the summer months to allow him to settle in there before the new school term began. Of course, William couldn't help feeling that it would have been even better if Arnold, Prudence and Kristen had come to Avenfore with him. But the professorship in Marburg was an academic prize his father had worked hard for and could not turn down. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a low growl from his stomach which told him he was hungry. Ravenous, in fact. He jumped off the bed and made his way downstairs to the kitchen where, thankfully, The sandwiches were still laid out on the table just as Aunt Edna had promised. As he sat down to eat, William had to admit that he did indeed feel at home, in fact more at home than ever.